Michael DiLeonardo, also known as Mikey Scars. The government says he's a high-ranking member of the Gambino Crime Family.
No Excuses with Michael DiLeonardo. I'm your host, RJ Roger. We have special guest, Jack Garcia, author, FBI agent, former FBI undercover agent. Jack, you did, I think, 42 operations, right? 42?
No, I did. We figured it out one day. It was over 100 because I wasn't counting in the many buy busts that I did while working at cop. So it's been over 100 undercover operations in the bureau of my career.
Wow. Now, and you are, I believe you did, and your number, nobody has ever done as many as you. You're number one, correct?
No. And I also did it simultaneously. So that made it even a little more difficult. I was juggling different identities and places, different names, different phones. And that became a little stressful at times, to say the least.
Taking multitasking to a whole new level with that.
Exactly.
So,
well, that's also why I blew up to like 500 pounds too. Stressed out of my mind.
Yeah, I saw you gained, I think you said, 80 pounds just on the Gambino case in 2000?
Yeah, well, it's a little more. That was a funny story in itself, I would say, with the judge. You got a second, I tell you.
Yeah, absolutely.
What happened was we were sitting in court, and they're going playing tape after tape because I was recording Greg and the other guys. And all of a sudden, you hear us eating. And, a lot of mob guys, guys from the street don't have good manners. Where they eat with the mouth full. Not you, Michael. You have a lot of class. Some of these guys are a bunch of gavons, and they're eating with their mouth full, cursing. The judge stops the procedure and says, wait a minute, Agent Garcia, every tape you play, it's the same thing. These guys are eating. They totally have no class. You guys are cursing. He says, all you guys ever do is eat. So he goes, how much weight did you gain? I said, Doc, I gained 80 pounds, at least on this case. Now, keep in mind that they clear out the gallery of the court because they didn't want to compromise my identity because I was working other cases with the Hollywood Police Department and Boston Police Department. So all they did was pipe in my testimony to another room where the reporters were. So here I am, the judge goes, oh my God, 80 pounds. I can understand that's all you were doing is eating. Well, the next day in front of the Daily News, the front page was Fat Fellas. The mobsters eat their way through New York. And, what a way to wake up in the morning. I'm having a cup of coffee, my bagel, then I'll get to read about Fat Fellas, So that became my moniker for a while. So, yeah, so that was we did a lot of eating, but we did some fine eating. And, you know what I mean? It wasn't junk food. We were eating some quality Italian food, and I miss those days.
We got to get that. We got to get that newspaper clip to put in the show if we can find it.
I have it.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a classic. Yeah, because I tell you, we did. As Michael would tell you, the Italian culture centers a lot around the dinner table. And, breaking bread with friends, with family, with loved ones. So that's all we did. Early in the morning, we go to the diner where a lot of guys in the crew will meet. And there we have eggs, sausage, bacon, bagel, just eating that. So, of course, once that's done, you go and do what you have to do. In our case, we used to go to the club or we went to see Greg at the nursing home to see his son. So they have people are dropping by with buttered rolls. they're dropping by with some kind of pastry. So you eat that. Then after that comes, of course, lunchtime. So there you go to lunch and you just order up like you're going to the chair. I mean, all you do is eat and eat and eat. And then you get done, you go back to the club, and somebody will walk in with more pastry. They'll come in with this, with that. And then, of course, come 7, 8 o'clock, you're hungry again. What do you got to do? You go out to dinner. And there you go again. You put on this food orgy of just eating. And then when you think it's all over and you're stuffed and your pants are just hanging, a belly hanging over your pants, somebody said, let's go to City Island and let's get something to eat at 2 o'clock in the morning. So that was like an everyday extravaganza. We ate more with the mob than we do on a cruise ship. Non-stop food eating, you know. I'm not complaining, don't get me wrong. I loved every minute of it, but it was a lot of chowing down.
That's funny.
See, Michael, you stayed nice and lean and mean with those pictures at the beginning in your nice suit. I must have eaten your portions when I was out there.
It's all the espresso he drinks, Jack. He burns it right off.
That's what it is.
The Cuban espresso, not the espresso, the Cuban espresso.
Yeah, and the article that they said, they called us in that newspaper was called The Wide Guys. And they said the once svelte agent. Svelte, I had to look that up. I don't know what the hell svelte means. I was never skinny. I was always a big guy, but I got really big when I was out there working the case. And no regrets, though. It was a lot of great food went in me, you know.
Now, Jack, it's funny you bring up food because prior to you going in, I think one of the discussions between you had was they were kind of giving you some schooling on things you can't mess up. And one of them was food, that you cannot mispronounce food. I think they asked you about manigot or manicotti. Do not say manicotti.
Yeah, well, that was we called mob school. You see, guys, I never worked organized crime. Because I speak Spanish, my expertise in the Bureau was working dope. So all I did was mostly work Colombian, South American. I worked all kinds of drug trafficking. That was my specialty because I speak Spanish fluently. And it was when some other agent that I did another case with on the Russians actually said, hey, listen, we're getting this case kick-started and we want you to pose as an Italian. Now, I was born in Havana, came to this country for 9. I love my ropa vieja, as Michael would tell you. I love Cuban food. That's all. I went to Italian food, but it wasn't my go-to. It was always Cuban food. So what happened was he said, look, if you want to pass as an Italian, you got to know the culture. You got to know about eating, and you don't want to sound like some hayseed to say, give me some braccioli, so the brujol, you know, give me some mozzarella, give me some mozzarella about mozzarella. So you want to sound like you grew up in that environment. But at the same token, the role that was given to me was that I grew up in Miami, hung around a lot of Cubans, but my culture was somewhat Italian. So I knew how to pronounce food because otherwise I would have sounded like some farmer, you know, like who is this guy, you know, claiming to be Italian, doesn't even know how to say anything. And so I learned how to do that. I watched the TV shows that had all the Italian chefs, and I practiced over and over again. So I knew Parmesan Reggiano, you know, I knew these words that I could pass off as a guy that, yeah, I've heard the words, I've used it, but I'm from Miami. You know, I'm a bunch of drug dealers down in Miami hanging out, but I do know my culture. I personally, at first, didn't think I was going to be able to pull it off. We were thinking like maybe we should have you where your mother is Italian and your father Cuban, but maybe we'll do it. And when I went in, they accepted me as you know, a third generation Sicilian that his family grew up in Miami, and you know, no question, because people think that the mob guys speak Italian all the time. Not all of them do. No. A lot of them are born and raised in the U.S. They may know some words in terminology, minchia, forget about it. It's not everybody who sits there like we do. And when I'm dealing with a drug dealer, I'm talking to them solely in Spanish. You know, Italians, not all of them are fluent. The old timers, yes, they are. But everybody else seems to be, a lot of the guys I met were Americanized.
I have a question, if I could jump in. And this goes to the name that they gave you. Or who created the name Falcone? How'd that come about?
Well, actually, when, part of going undercover is you got to get all this identity, and you got to make sure that if somebody did a stop on you, that that you patch, they won't catch you to be a phony. So in this particular case, the first thing you do is pick a name. So as a tribute to Judge Giovanni Falcone in Italy, that was assassinated there along with Borsellino, I said, let me pay us a tribute, take his name, his surname, which is Falcone. And I went with Jack because you try to keep your first name all the time in case somebody sees you. You go, hey, Jack, you can kind of, be able to deal with that, So I took that name, and it kind of backfired on me because in one conversation I had with DePalma was like, he goes, you're Sicilian, right? I go, yeah, I'm a third generation. He goes, you're not related to that cocksucker Giovanni Falcone, are you? I go, hell no. I says, just want to make sure, He, they knew about Falcone.
Jack, that's the universe. That's the universe giving you a little sign. That's not a coincidence,
Yeah, that's true. And so in hindsight, I should have said, maybe I should have done that, picked the name, because the last thing you want as an undercover is somebody finding a little questionable issue in your character or your ID, because that could expose you. So this was a mistake, like, you're Falcone, and so that was my role. But what I did do, guys, out of the ordinary, my wife and I were vacationing down in Florida. So as I was going to take on this, I had the driver's license, Social Security, and everything. I said, well, what if these guys say, hey, Jackie boy, you're from Florida, right? Let's go down there for the weekend. I'm sure, Michael, you went down to Florida many times. And sure enough, we went looking for gravesite for a Mr. and Mrs. Falcone. And they were going to become my parents. And we found them in the actual cemetery where Jackie Gleason is buried. So I knew exactly where to go in case, and it could have been an innocent thing. That guy could have said to me, hey, Jack, we're down here, pay tribute to your parents, do the right thing. Let's go get some flowers. What am I going to do? Right? I don't have a way out of that. So naturally, of course, I knew where it was. I would take them right there. And the only thing I would hope is that the real family wasn't there, because that would be a little bit awkward of me sitting there bursting in tears while the real family go, who's this guy over here? But I knew who were Mr. and Mrs. Falcone, and I had those grave sites that I'll gladly send it to you. And God bless, they both passed on, and that was going to be my story. As an undercover, every I must be dotted and every T must be crossed, because all it takes is somebody having suspicion of you. And Michael, you'll know, when you were out there, you get the bad vibes from somebody. This guy's no good. Why? He may not even have a reason for not being good. He just sensed it. And I didn't want any sensors going up. I wanted everything to be smooth, so everybody likes Big Jackie Boy. That's what I want.
When did you start getting comfortable from the transition from dealing with the Miami guys to the New York guys? At what point do you feel like a load came off your chest, like you fit in?
Well, that was like, I would say, about the 6 months. I didn't want to sound like a fanboy. I didn't want to be showing up all the time where they went. It had to be like, hey, I'm coming in there to get some food for my girl. Hey, how you guys doing? And leave. Not interested. I didn't want to be overly eager. And then I would throw out some like teasing things to them. Like, I knew the old man, Greg, as Michael would tell you, is this guy smoked cigarettes so much, and he had like a quarter of a lung. I mean, he was in horrible breathing, but he would take a cigarette, rip off the filter, and smoke it. So I knew he liked that, and I was working at the same time a case in Atlantic City with counterfeit cigarettes. So out of the clear blue, I talked to his driver at the time and said, "Hey, what kind of cigarettes you smoke?" He says, "I come up with some." Sure enough, I gave him as a gift these cigarettes at a very discounted price that he can make profit. He was unable to do it. I said, "Give it back to me. I got them sold already." I got the cigarettes back, like no cop does that. So I took the cigarettes back, and then I gave him an envelope the next week, as a tribute for coming home from prison. And he liked that. And then I didn't answer his calls right away. He would call the source and say, "Hey, bring Jackie Boy out, come with us." He wanted to regale us in stories of the Westchester Premier Theater and his friendship with Frank Sinatra and all of that. I wouldn't go. I'd blow him off. So I became the hunted, not the hunter. And that's kind of what I wanted that. I wanted him to want me, not every way he turned around, I was there. Because then that smells on itself.
Jack, would you say that like Greg was he a just so money hungry or so was he an easy target?
He wasn't an easy target. He did not want to meet people and engage in mob business. He was always engaging with people because he was recognized as a celebrity mobster. He ran the Westchester Premier, and we went to restaurants where people would get up and say, "Greg, I remember going to your club, Westchester Premier. We had a great time. We saw Dean Martin. We saw this." So he loved that, But to get into mob business, he was very selective. Part of doing undercover, either you go as a cold hit where nobody introduces you, or you go in an informant or two informants that kind of make you vouch for you. And that's what happened in my case. I had sources who vouched for you, so that made all of those questioning go away. So Greg, as far as with me was concerned, at first he was curious as to who I was, but why we wanted him as a target was we know his history. His history is Greg liked to talk, and we in the FBI like to listen. So it was a perfect match. And when we first hooked up with Greg, keep in mind he was in prison on the case with Michael, with the gold case. And when he was in prison, he put out a hit on Nicky Lasorsa, who was a soldier at the time, that Greg proposed for membership. He was the only one he ever proposed, so he told me. And he wanted to whack him because he wasn't taking up any tribute payments at Valvella's restaurant in Connecticut. And he wanted that money to go to his wife. Nicky Lasorsa used the restaurant to entertain people because Nicky was a very well-to-do guy. So that angered Greg, and Greg took a hit. The guy turned out on him. Turned out that the mob guys, the guy who was going to whack supposedly Nicky Lasorsa, was an informant for ATF. So he got busted with that, went to trial in prison, was found not guilty. So when he came out, he had a target on his back because, as Michael would tell you, you don't take he tried to get a made man killed while he was in prison. So he had to do some accountability. But Greg was able to squash that. So when I went out with Greg, I was always careful that maybe I kept thinking to myself, somebody's going to come into that door with a shotgun, or somebody's going to come into that door with a gun to whack Greg, and here I am, I'm going to get whacked in. So it was a little precarious being around Greg at the beginning because I knew, actually, one of the funny things was, and it's typical mob thing, the FBI knew about the hit on Greg DePalma. They went to see Greg and they says, "Greg, we have good information that your life is in danger, because of the Nicky Lasorsa hit you took out." So he goes, "Really, for me?" He says, "Hey guys, I have no idea what you're talking about. There's the door. Now get the hell out." True mob action of not wanting to deal with that, but it had to bother him. And Greg, after some time, got together with the bosses, because I drove him one time to Jojo Perazzo's son's office, and there he was meeting with the administration to try to, straighten this mess out with Nicky LaSorsa.
Great info, Jack. Now I'll give a little background on Nicky LaSorsa. I was straightened out with Nicky LaSorsa.
Okay.
And Louis Brage, through Greg DePalma, had put him up. They were in Tony Baker's crew, then Louis Brage took over, and they put Nicky up. Now, Nicky LaSorsa owned the car dealership. Nicky LaSorsa also was a heroin dealer.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, 100%.
Now, was he a violent guy, Michael, or what?
No, not that I know of. After the ceremony, it was hello and goodbye with him and I. He was a very aloof type of guy, really assertive. From what I understand, that he really wasn't too well liked, but he was a big money guy. And he had the guy that was a CI, as we see it in the Foxwood tape. Joe Fusaro was around him also, and they were both in the heroin business together. So, there was a major resentment with Greg and him throughout time, right from when he got straightened out. That was starting to build with Greg. So you're right on point there. Very interesting, because I never heard that before about you driving Greg up to see the administration in the attorney's office, because that's what we do. When people in trouble and go to the attorney's office, that's the safe zone. Under the guise of counsel, you go there and you have an excuse all to be together. So that's a great story.
He kind of like I remember it was another sit down that I drove him to when they actually sat down over dinner and all. But LaSorsa was kind of like Greg would say, he's a stone in his shoe all the time with Nicky, because, he always felt Nicky didn't take care of him. And what happened is, in Valvella, well, you're more a Brooklyn guy. This was up in Connecticut. You might have heard this.
I was there a lot, Jack. I used to go up. I went up there a lot.
Oh, okay. So So what happened is they took the maid. What happened is Greg left, because Greg had them in under the umbrella. He goes to prison. Nicky's supposed to take care of it. He's just getting free meals. The Albanians saw an opening. So the Albanians went in and hung the guy by his feet and used him as a boxing bag and forced him to pay $5,000. I think it was a week or a month. I don't know. I don't recall the amount. But what happened with Greg when he came out of prison, first of all, he was aggravated because his parole didn't allow him to go to Connecticut. He couldn't go to Connecticut because he would be violated unless he got permission. But when he would sneak up there, he straightened that out with the Albanians and said, "This is my place. This don't belong to you guys here at all." And Greg got the Valvella back, because that was a gold mine, and he was making money hand over fist. And but he was angry at Nicky because Nicky LaSorsa was bringing in professional people in the car dealership and drinking the best wines and the best meals, and then I'll sign for the check. Did you wind up signing for your check on the arm, or what happened when you went?
No, the first time I went there was with Louis Brage, Greg DePalma, there's Joe, and Louis Brage's crew, Little Mario, Angelo, all Louis Brage's crew, which was the DePalma crew later on, with John Jr., myself, and a couple other guys went up there for the first time, probably early 90s. And the owner's Dave. I think he may be Albanian, Dave.
Yeah, he is Albanian.
I don't know if he's Italian, but I'll tell you what, anybody listening is in the tri-state area, go to that restaurant, it's still open. Tremendous food, as you know.
Where is it?
Where the celebrities would go. That's where Mariah Carey would go. Regis Philbin. They're always talking about that place. And also Paul Newman, who lived in Connecticut. I mean,
Michael Bolton, Nicole Sheridan, Michael Bolton. Yeah, we've seen them all up there at different times. I went up there a lot. Really, really nice. And the wine cellar, he built that wine cellar. Fabulous.
That's where he had tremendous bottles in there. But how about now? They own a second one. They own one downtown. You know that, right?
I heard they moved the rest.
They're down in the meatpacking district. They have about Vela. So they're supposedly, good. But yeah, the Greg DePalma had that place under his wing, so to speak. But yeah, Greg was a character, man. Let me tell you something. He was a guy who his whole life is all about hustling, making money, and screwing people over.
Well, Jack, I wanted to ask you because you're going into how he was as a man. I'm curious. Did he ever speak to you about his son and how he straightened them out, why he straightened them out? Did he ever get into all that? How he felt about it?
Yeah, it was heartbreaking, because when we first heard about it, we heard that he had tried to commit suicide, in prison. And the story there are two stories. There's the real story, and then the Greg DePalma spin story. The real story was that he testified in the case with Michael with the grand jury. Then his father found out about it because he was in prison too, somehow got word to him and got him on a face-to-face where he said, listen, you are betraying both families, your blood family and your real family, which is the Gambino family. He says, how could you do this to me? How could you be a rat? He went on this whole thing. So what does he do? The kid must have been so manipulated by him that he was found hanging in the cell. Okay? Now, Greg tells the story that the FBI went into his cell and hung him. That's the story that he was getting around. And he had to come up with that story because, as Michael would tell you, in that world, that's no good. That, his son was betraying members of the family. So he went on that story about he was, killed by the FBI. But he was heartbreaking because then we found out that he got a compassionate release and he got put in a nursing home, a Jewish nursing home, which was in New Rochelle, beautiful place. And we would go there for our meetings, and Greg's room consisted of old posters of rock bands, and he would have music going. He had private nurses. At first, I thought he had what I like to call the Italian flu, where, you claim to be sick and you show up to court with a mask and everything in a wheelchair. And no, when I saw him, man, it was legit. He was in a vegetative coma. And it was heartbreaking because Greg was really loving father. I would see he would bathe him. He would take care of him. He would talk to him all the time. He would arrange meetings. And he was heartbroken. But the wife would say that Greg was responsible for that because he made him. She goes, you're the one. This is your fault. Because they had two kids. The other kid was a straight citizen. But the Craig, he said, you made him what he is today. This is all your fault, you piece of shit. They used to go at him like you won't believe. And what happened was Greg really believed that he was going to come out of the coma and that he even brought in Santeria people to try to get him. And then he would sit there and goes, Jackie boy, look, he's getting better. Watch, I'll ask him something. He'll blink his eyes. And he was an automatic response. And it broke your heart because, Greg was like his son. That meant he really was very proud that his son was straightened out. He was very proud that his son was put in John Gotti Jr.'s crew. He was, according to him, John Gotti proposed. Michael, you would know better. Who proposed him for membership? Was it John Gotti?
No. John was.
Are we talking about the father or Craig the son?
The father. He said that the father proposed him to get straightened out, and once he got straightened out, he got put on John Gotti Jr. on Junior's crew.
No, he proposed him to Louis Brage, who was the captain at the time. Louis Brage was the captain there. And they went to Junior, and Junior approved it. And later on, Junior, through working out, Willie Marshall and Craig DePalma working out, they like to work out a lot. Junior took him from Louis Brage. And from what I understood at that time, Greg was not happy that Junior took him out of family, away from family. Greg seems to have changed some stories, but no, he wasn't happy that he took his son from him because they were in the same crew. He was proud he was with Junior, of course, but because he had the ear. That's how Junior gets roped into the Scores case, which was a disaster for Junior by taking Willie Marshall and Craig with him. That was a disaster for Junior and the family at that point. But Junior really loved Craig at that time. He did.
I know they were supposed to be very much into eating sawgrass and very healthy. Even Greg used to make fun of his son. He was very much into working out. But every guy that I met out there, guys in the crew and people that knew, have always said, and to quote the Sopranos, he never had the making of a varsity player. Like Craig was a nice kid that he had no business in the life. And his father pressured him, and that's why he broke in prison. But they always said that about him, that he never really had the making of being a wise guy in any mean, because they said he was, like I said, a health nut. He liked driving around. He had a Ferrari, right? Didn't he, Michael, or something?
I didn't see it, but he'd had some nice cars. He'd come down with. They had money. Greg had some money.
Yeah, well, Greg always had money from that Westchester Premier Theater, which is that place was such a goal. I remember going there. I mean, I don't know if you guys, RJ or Michael, about this Westchester Premier. It was the place to go. It was Las Vegas, and there was the Westchester Premier Theater. I mean, you go on eBay and you put in Westchester Premier Theater and just see the programs that are people that played there. You're talking about Sammy Davis, Dean Martin, Frank Sinatra, Diana Ross, Dionne Warwick, the who's who of entertainment, the Santana, you name it, they were there. And Greg, of course, was busting it wide open. I mean, he went as far as you would buy a seat that would say seat 1A, and you think I'm in the first row, 1A. When you got there, there were like 30 rows of full chairs. He sold cash.
Was Greg a capable guy? Because it seems like he wielded a lot of power.
I talked to Michael about that. He's talked to me that he did some work once, and that was the extent of it. I don't know. He never admitted to me anything, but only thing that leads me to believe he was in a very violent crew. He was in the Nino Gaggi crew with Roy DeMeo and those guys. So my question would be is if he's in that crew and they're doing a hit, he may be the guy digging a hole or doing something. But I had this conversation with Michael. He doesn't think that he did. He maybe not, because he was such a big earner. I mean, the guy made some serious money in the Westchester Premier Theater. He made in construction industry. He had all these guys, the unions that he had. So that, Michael, what's your thoughts on that? You think he ever pulled the trigger on somebody, did some work?
Because he goes way back, Greg. And, he's definitely involved in work. For those days, he was on work. Most of the guys were at that time. Pulling the trigger, I don't know. I never heard of him doing anything specifically, but at that time, he would have had to be involved some way, somehow. Everybody knew Greg. Greg had so many connections in every family. Every family. In Westchester Theater you're talking about, there's that famous picture, RJ, that you could throw in with Carlo Gambino, Paul Castellano, and everybody else in there. He was a lightning rod, and he did have the Westchester Theater locked up. It's a shame they busted it out. I was up with a couple of concerts up there myself. That was the place to go. You're correct. Greg was a Brooklyn guy. He was born in Brooklyn, And you were in the Bronx, weren't you, at one time after Miami? Did you go to the Bronx?
Yeah, I grew up in the Bronx. Yeah, I went to high school in the Bronx and everything. But I did go. That's why I went to the Westchester Premier Theater. That was the place, to go. And Greg is he really made some serious money with that, and he did a lot of hustling. I did hear one time that he took a bartender who was stealing from him, that he put a drill to his head. That was it. And I could see that vindictive nature in him, because Greg had a mean streak with him that I once in a while I would see, and maybe some people backed away from him. But you're right as far as knowing everybody. He introduced me to Rudy Santabello. Rudy Santabello was the cop killer. He's part of the West Side, and he had a gambling club right over 238th Street in Yonkers. And the nicest guy in the world. I mean, the guy was a scumbag. He killed this cop, and he went Supreme Court. They wound up overturning his case. And this guy was called Handsome Rudy. This little guy who impeccably dressed. His socks matched his shoes, matched his shirt, his collar. I mean, he was like a dapper guy. And Greg and him, he would say, I was pass messages. You told my friend that I said hello and I miss him and all of that. And a lot of the old timers, even Pasquale DeLuca, another Genovese guy, some of these old timers didn't like him because I guess he was from that old era. But the newer guys like you, Michael, and John Gotti, they all thought he had a megaphone mouth and that, maybe he was always up to putting hands in your pocket. You know what I mean? Because he was always a hustler. He'd be the kind of guy that I would drive him around and pick up envelopes, and he would be sitting there going, "You got 2 nickels to rub together. You got freaking envelopes popping out of your suit jacket, your back pocket, and you're telling me you're broken down? Are you kidding me?" He goes, "Jackie boy, then you spot me like just a kilo, I need it." And that was him. And his attitude was, "See that guy over there?" He goes, "Man, I owe him some money." He said, I told him, I said, "I'll pay him whenever I get the money, but don't hold your breath." So he was a hustler, man, a guy, but legitimately he knew Leroy Neiman, because I drove him to Leroy Neiman's house. He knew Willie Mays. I talked to Willie on the phone.
Jack, tell me the Leroy Neiman story with the posters, the paintings.
Oh, he goes to what happens is he's always looking for a scam. So the scam was, he would go to Leroy Neiman's house, and while Leroy went to another room, because he had his house, his apartment in Manhattan, I think it's Central Park South, had also a studio. And he would bring in a leather, poster. And when he's in another room, he opens these drawers and he starts stuffing them down this freaking thing, just robbing, right? And then before that, he would go to people like a legitimate businessman and say, "Hey, you want to get you an original Leroy Neiman, Frank Sinatra, this and that. I'll get it for you real cheap, 5,000, 6,000. And he'd go to Leroy, and Leroy give it to him for like 1,000. So Greg was be making a good score with that. And he would be constantly robbing this poor guy, Leroy. In fact, I think Leroy Neiman was going to testify on his trial. I think the one you were involved with, Mike, but I think he fled the country like a lot of people, like Liza Minnelli did too. She fled the country on the trial because, he starts calling in those markers. But yeah, he would rob him blind. Willie Mays, he would rob him blind. He would send them boxes of, baseballs for him to autograph. And then he would give it to another guy to go and sell them at one of those baseball card shows. Make all kinds of money that way. We also had the legitimate doctors would provide this beautiful golf outing. He would finagle it that he'll get 2 tables that sold for $500 a seat. He would get that for free. He sell that for $1,000 a seat, and then he gets his own table. And then they had all of the sports memorabilia. It was Joey Bags of Donuts sitting in the back signing Joe Namath, Dick Butkus. It was all fugazi shit he was selling.
I'm always curious, you have a job to do. You're an agent. Your job's to gather information, put this guy in prison. But you're spending years with a guy. You're with him every day. You're talking to him every day. You're driving him around. And so when I see stories like Joe Pistone and Donnie Brasco and Lefty or Sonny Black and stuff, and I see, how they play it up and how close they were and stuff, I'm always like, how do you separate Like, did you like him personally? What is he the kind of guy that you would like if you would just bumped into him at the bar? Do you start to feel a little bit of an attachment to him? Does it ever become conflicting with your job, knowing that I'm coming close with this guy, but I'm going to put him to jail for life if I can? Like, what's that like inside of your head? I'm always so concerned by stuff like that.
Yeah, well, RJ, first of all, I hated Greg DePalma. He was exhausted. He was a guy that would train your life out of you. It was always a hustle. Everything was a hustle. He'd be hustling people that were nice. Feel bad for them. Now, I've met a lot of guys when I was undercover that I liked. I like Robert Vaccaro, who was a acting captain in the crew, and with Greg. Him and I, we talk football, baseball. We do all kinds. He was a likable guy. He didn't want anything from me or from others. He was a cool guy, you know. But then there are the guys who just the bleeders, you know, the guys who just want to take it. And that was the great DePalma of the world. So he wasn't a guy you enjoyed him because I was able to read. That's all he wanted. Like if I remember, I used to sell him what he thought was stolen watches, when in reality were watches that we obtained to our forfeiture office. So we would give him a Rolex watch, solid gold, that went for like 17,000 new. I said, you give me $4,000. He would sell it to some guy for 8 or 9,000 for a beautiful watch. But he made money with me, so he liked that. It's all about the mob. He would not be hanging out with me unless he was making money. I mean, I don't care if I'm the funniest guy on earth. It's all about making money in the mob. But as far as Greg thing, never once did I say, man, I like this guy. This is like a father to me. That guy was an asshole, period. The guy was just, everything about him was just bad. He gives the mob a bad name. How's that? If that's even possible. Michael, you never hung out with him. Michael's a personable guy, even when he was on the street. Why did you hang out with Greg?
Well, I told the story once before with Junior during the Scores case, before the Scores case happened, when Junior got Craig put with him. And we had to go meet Craig. And I was Craig and Greg. And I told Junior, you got to stay away from this guy. Let me handle this stuff with the Scores stuff going on. Let me handle the construction with him, with Defoe. And he ruined that guy. The guy from Defoe, he destroyed that guy. Great guy. You know, he was a good man. Yeah, he ran some company, some construction company.
Oh.
Also,
what was his name? I forgot his name, but Defoe, and then Persico Construction was another one. He just runs him to the ground. He don't care. He moves on. You know.
What I told John, I was building him up to stay away from it. Give it to somebody else to handle Greg. He's going to get you pinched. The guy's got a big mouth. Without tape recordings, he would have been one of the greatest gangsters ever. But to me, he was one of the best agents you ever had. When he got pinched in the last game, he says, let him out. He says, you don't need to get more guys arrested. He's one of the best guys you could ever have. So we're in a car one night, me, Tommy Cacciapoli was driving, and Junior. And he says, I got to go meet Greg by the Grand Central, wherever it was. So we drive over there, and I think it was the Grand Central or the Van Wyck. So we drive over there, and Junior gets out of the car, and me and Tommy wave. We don't get out, right? Junior comes in, he's ripping, right? About that we didn't get out of the car and say hello. And he could tell you, I'm in the back seat. He says, what do you think this guy's a fucking rat? You treat him like a rat. How come you didn't get out there and talk to them, say hello? How could you do that? And you know, he was really, really angry. He was white. He says, and you, he goes to Tommy, and you too. So after he calms down, we go to dinner, he calms down. I said, John, this guy's got a big mouth. He's going to get us pinched. I wasn't treating him as a rat and all this other nonsense that he was spewing about. He was mad that I didn't get out because I slighted the guy. But look what happened. I didn't have to be Nostradamus to know what was going to happen. He talked to everybody. Talked to Junior's on tape, and in that case, the Scores case, right? He's on tape talking to Craig in his house, saying, "I'm going to buy your father a radio station." Another way, Junior's talking on a wiretap phone in Greg's house, saying, "I'm going to buy your father a radio station."
Unbelievable. But you know what? You're right. If it was the old time where they didn't have the technology of wiretaps or anything like that, he would have probably been one hell of a gangster. But he was his own worst enemy. And I used to know how to tweak him. I mean, I get him going so he starts talking, I fuck him, I'm gonna kill him, I beat that mother. You know, he would just go off violently and tell you crazy things. And then I knew his source. I knew what buttons to push with Greg. Like I knew there were times that he would just be mellow, and he would. That's mostly when he had a good score, when he had some money, because everything around revolved around money. So RJ, regarding your question, I have no like for this man. Never did. I've done so many undercover cases, met so many people. It isn't like Joe Pistone, they're one or two guys. I mean, I've done hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of freaking guys, and I can count them in my hand, on both hands, how many are really good people that you wonder yourself, like, why are you doing this? You know, I did this Hollywood cop. He was a detective for 17 years. Guy was dirty. He was providing protection for me with dope, providing protection with stolen merchandise. The guy was the most lovable, nicest guy. You would try to even try to talk him out of doing shit. And like, oh man, really get somebody out. And this guy, he was just in love with the life. And he thought we were really, at that time, we thought we were gangsters. And he didn't. But there are people you meet that you build a bond, but you have to keep it real. Look, this is my job. And I think the bad guys have respect for you as long as you don't fabricate shit, as long as you don't set them up, but you're out there doing your job. They respect that. Like, our job is to get them, and their job is to keep from being gotten by us, you know? And as long as we all play that game, they fine. There's no vindictive nature with. That's why you laugh about people with this. Oh, they got a contract on 500,000 Joe Pistone. There's no such thing as contracts. That's my. If the boss wants you whack, you whack. He doesn't say. You don't say to the boss, "Hey, boss, I'll whack him, but you got to give me $500,000." That's your job. You whack the guy. Period. You don't.
That's a big misnomer in Cosa Nostra. I feel like 'cause you hear people say that a lot. It's just not
Exactly.
true.
They think there's a contract on you. What do you do to collect their money? So what is another person who maybe is a criminal who's not part of the life? He goes knocking on the door of the social club and go, "Hey, I just whacked Jack Falcone, Joe Pistone. Where's my 500,000?" Whack the guy for just even saying those around them. So you know this whole thing that people people conflate the mob with Hollywood. There's two different, what you see in Hollywood, the way he's portrayed, and the way Michael lived. I mean, Michael lived this life. Michael was due to become a consigliere in that family. He was all the stuff that I heard out there, he was on an administration. He was put to handle Sammy the Bull's empire, so to speak. I mean, anything dealing with a lot of money coming in, that means you're you're somebody who is knowledgeable and capable of. So that's kind of how, how the mob works. These people that come up with these, yeah, he had a contract on in his ass, and yeah, they want to whack him for 500. Yeah, right, collect on that. I want to see you do it. Because it doesn't exist. There is no such thing. The boss wants you dead, you're dead, period.
Yeah, Jack, it's funny. It's interesting you said that, and I'd like to maybe you can expand on that a little. And I've been on this thing lately that I've been trying to open our listeners' minds to get out of this movie Hollywood stuff that their head is in. That it's this glamour world and everything like that. And you just kind of touched on that. And I take a little bit of pushback every now and then because of my positioning on it, because I think that Hollywood and film and all these things have put so much of a misconception out there. I heard Gleason talking about it too. You were there, you were around guys every day for years. Can you kind of talk about, like, most of the people you were around, most of the things that you see, do you see any, would you say there's honor, loyalty, respect, or this brotherhood, or do you think it's from what you've seen? Is it so contradictory from how it's built up in the press and the media and the films and the books and all that kind of stuff?
I think it's